Batman Arkham Origins was a game that was quite divisive when it first came out. It's not that surprising considering how many challenges the game had to overcome when first released. First of all, it was the first game in the series not made by Rocksteady and instead was made by WB Montreal. They were also given a shorter development time to make the game, and it was pretty much an entire new team, so they hadn't worked on the prior two games. It's also safe to say that there are very high expectations after how loved Arkham City was, so WB Montreal had a difficult challenge to deal with. Despite how controversial the game was when it first released, Origins has become much better received in the last couple of years as people have gone back and replayed it, with some even putting it as their favourite game in the Arkham series. In this video, I want to go over my thoughts and feelings on the game, having played through it again recently, and go over the strengths and also the weaknesses of the game. The first thing I want to talk about regarding Origins is the game's story, and I actually really like it, and I actually think it's my favourite story in the Arkham series, though I'll admit I haven't played Arkham's Shadow yet, so I don't know where that one would rank in my list. Anyways, Arkham Origins is a Year 2 Batman story, and I actually think that's one of the game's strengths, as it allows for a bigger emphasis on the characters. The perfect example of this is Batman himself. In the first two games, we met a Batman with years of experience, who has fought his entire rogues gallery and gone through many events throughout his career. Arkham Origins, however, has a younger and more brutal Batman who's still getting used to this whole thing and who's kind of a dick to his allies like Alfred. Speaking of Alfred, this game puts the biggest emphasis on Bruce and Alfred's relationship out of all the Arkham games, and it's kind of the heart of Arkham Origins, as Alfred sees Bruce head down a dark path that will end with his death, and trying to pull him back from that, but Bruce just ignores him at every turn. Despite the conflict present between the pair, you can still see how much Bruce values Alfred, however, and there are so many little moments throughout the game that really strengthen their dynamic, like during their short conversations in the Batcave, or them wishing each other a Merry Christmas when Bruce is out patrolling the streets. Batman's whole arc throughout the game is going from a vengeful and bitter person to a symbol of hope, and learn to accept others' help instead of isolating himself from people who are just trying to help him. Much like all the Arkham games, Arkham Origins is a great opening, with Batman hearing the news that Black Mask is storming Blackgate and going off to stop him. By the way, the cutscenes in this game look phenomenal. They're just so cinematic, and I also love the Christmas aesthetic in Arkham Origins. The game has a great atmosphere. Anyways, Batman fights his way through the prison, and I do like how this is the first instance where you see Batman's inexperience, as when he tries interrogating someone, they actually don't give up the info right away, showing that criminals aren't as scared of Batman yet, with him so early in his career, though that changes as the game progresses. This is also where you meet Black Mask for the first time, with Killer Croc guarding him. One thing I do appreciate about replaying the game is how you can actually see the hints that this isn't actually Sionis wearing a mask. For example, of how him attacking Blackgate and causing so much chaos doesn't really make sense for him to do, and even Lowe brings up how out of character this is for Sionis before he's executed. We also see Killer Croc here, though he doesn't really get that much to do, and it's disappointing after how much I liked his segment in Asylum. Here, he's just used as a tutorial boss essentially, and he's very easy to defeat. He's just used here as Black Mask's muscle before being defeated and disappearing the rest of the game before being beaten even easier than he was the first time. Anyways, Black Mask escapes, but it's here we learn that Black Mask has hired 8 assassins to take Batman down. I do think this is a really cool, if simple, concept. The idea of a rageful, brutal Batman going up against 8 assassins on Christmas Eve while trying to take down Black Mask is just a very fun idea for a plot. With that said, some of the assassins like Shiva and Deadshot do tend to get a bit overshadowed as they're negated through side quests, and others like Croc and Electrocutioner don't really do much. Also, it's always been a bit jarring that despite this being a Year 2 Batman tale, he's going up against all these villains that most iterations of Batman don't encounter until at least a couple of years into their careers, like Bane and Deathstroke for example. Also, I do have to give props to this game for being the only one in the series to let you go to the Batcave outside of challenge maps. I like how it's still in its early stages, where none of the mementos like the giant dinosaur is there, and the Batmobile hasn't even been built yet. His equipment is just messily tossed around the cave, showing he doesn't really make time to make it a proper base, since he barely spends any time there with Alfred. I also do find it funny how you can gain XP from talking to Alfred, which is a really cool detail they added. Anyways, Batman finds out the drone was used by Penguin, and after a few brief roadblocks, he eventually makes it to Jezebel Plaza, and I just love how Batman's presented like a demon, allowing us to view him as the thugs do for a moment, and it's even more effective of how ruthless this Batman is, with how he loses his temper, and literally drops a guy off a rooftop, very nearly killing him. As I stated earlier, it's a great contrast to the slightly more calmer and collected Batman we see in the later games, and shows how this Batman can control his emotions, and allows his rage to get the better of him. After this encounter, he makes it to the final offer, and it makes for a very fun dungeon to explore, with it being a massive ship. I like how you can see different mementos around the place, as we know Penguin becomes something of a collector later on. Batman fights his way through the ship, and confronts the electrocutioner, and in what's possibly the funniest moment in the series, he immediately knocks him out in one attack. I did find it a bit dumb how he just left him there without tying him up first, or contacting the police, though in fairness, Batman does mention how careless it was later on. I suppose he didn't really have time to do it either, but something that's always kind of bugged me, though Electrocutioner died pretty soon afterwards regardless, so I guess it didn't really matter. Anyways, Batman finds Penguin torturing Alberto Falcone and saves him, before interrogating Penguin to find out information on Black Mask. I also thought it was kind of a missed opportunity this game didn't flesh out the Falcones a little more and their rivalry of Penguin, as this is pretty much the only time in the series we ever see the Falcones acknowledged outside of Arkham Shadow and a few side stories, and with this game being set in Batman's early years, I think it would have been interesting to see them sort of fall from grace as the actual Rogues Gallery finally begin to make their appearances, similar to the Long Halloween. Unfortunately, we don't see the Falcones or Penguin after this segment, as the story's already juggling so much. Speaking of Penguin, his appearance here is fine, I suppose. Like in most other Batman stories, he's pretty much just used here to provide Batman a little more info about the plot, and is easily beaten up before Deathstroke arrives. Much like the Falcones, I wish we got to see a little more of him, as he finally starts becoming the ruthless kingpin we see in Arkham City, but he's still alright in this game, and served his purpose, although his best appearance in the series is still in Arkham City, where he actually felt like a genuine threat. Batman learns about the murder at Lacey Towers before being intercepted by Deathstroke, and he manages to defeat him. Much like Penguin, I kind of wish Deathstroke had a more prominent role hunting Batman throughout the game and fighting him at different points, especially of him being the world's greatest assassin, only to be defeated by a Year 2 Batman in their first encounter, and with how built up he was in the marketing. But the game had other assassins to showcase, and we did get a cool boss fight out of it, and it's still far better than how dirty they did Deathstroke in Arkham Knight. Batman heads to Lacey Towers, and in what's easily the best detective sequence in this series, he discovers that a person calling himself the Joker broke in and killed Sionis' girlfriend and fought Sionis. The game's detective sequences have always been pretty simple, of you needing to usually just scan something, but this game developed it a bit further. I really like how we saw a bit more of Batman's detective side as he slowly unravels the mystery by needing to rope back around to the crime scene later on, after hacking into the National Criminal Database and deciphering the truth. Not to mention, the music and presentation of the once Batman figures it all out is so well done, and I just wish we got to see a bit more of this in the series. After reviewing the crime scene, Batman heads to the GCPD, where we see just how corrupt it truly is, of how they talk about taking up Black Mask's offer and collecting the bounty on Batman's head. We can even find bags of stash money in the vents from bribery, as we see even some of the cops plot behind Gordon's back, showing how Gotham is not safe at all, and why Batman can't trust the GCPD, and how he has a long way to go in fixing the city. He also encounters Barbara here, and it's cool seeing their first meeting, especially knowing how much they'll rely on each other in the future when Barbara becomes Batgirl. And we already see how much Barbara idolizes Batman, as she covers for him when Brandon's SWAT force arrives, and Batman makes his exit. He also encounters Gordon for the first time, and they have a bit of conflict over Batman's way of doing things, as Jim argues against Batman's vigilantism and Batman tries to explain why he's needed. Not going to lie, their whole dynamic in this game was pretty weak, which is pretty disappointing as we've seen in other media how great it can be, but in this game not much time was really devoted to it, and it just feels pretty bare bones as there are so few interactions between them, and it is kind of disappointing when you consider the whole point of the story as Batman needing to trust his allies and let people in. You'd think Gordon would have a bigger role to play in that case, but he doesn't. He also comes off as being a bit too confrontational in this iteration in my opinion. Like, I know Batman's a vigilante, so I don't expect them to trust him immediately. Of how obvious the corruption is at this point, I feel like Gordon will at least be a little bit more willing to hear him out, especially with what they're up against. I know it's to add more conflict to the narrative, but it just kind of comes off as being a little bit forced at times, especially towards the end when he berates him after the fight with Bane despite clearly knowing Joker gave him an impossible choice either way. Batman heads to the sewers where he discovers Sionis isn't actually dead and he's been tracking Joker this whole time, and he makes his way to Gotham Merchants Bank where we get our first confrontation between the pair. A lot of people didn't like this twist, as not only was Joker the main villain of the prior two games before this, but also meant Black Mask, who had been hyped up as the main villain, was basically shoved to the side in some mediocre side quests. I mean, the guy didn't even get a pre-rendered cutscene in his side missions. Whilst I don't mind Joker having a big role once again, I do see where people are coming from. Personally, to me, the Arkham series is always about the relationship between Batman and Joker, so it makes sense the game title Arkham Origins would focus on the origins of their dynamic. I do really like the Joker in this game. Granted, the Joker is amazing in all the games, but this game actually does go a little bit deeper into his psychology and relationship with Batman. The twist itself isn't even a bad twist or anything either, it's well built up, and the reveal is really good. With that said, as I said, it's a shame Black Mask is pretty much kicked out of the story at this point, and is just used as Batman and Joker's punching bag essentially. I actually think maybe it would have been better and allows Black Mask to maintain a bigger role if perhaps the twist was cut and he remained the main villain up until the Royal Hotel section, where he ends up being desperate enough to hire Joker, who then takes over as the main antagonist from that point onwards. Of course, this would mean that Bane would most likely be cut from the game, as Joker would sort of take his role as the antagonist for the last third, so I get that has its own shortcomings, but we'll talk more about Bane and his role later in the narrative. Anyways, I do really like how when Joker first confronts Batman, he actually isn't obsessed with him at all, and simply views him as nothing but a nuisance to his plans, and I love how we see that change through the course of the game after Batman saves him later on. Joker escapes and Batman heads to the steel mill where he meets Copperhead and is poisoned, and it's here we see him suffer through hallucinations, and we get to see a little bit more of the vulnerability of this Batman and his shame at feeling as though he's failed his parents' legacy. These hallucination sequences were already done in the previous game, and this whole section is pretty similar to the Wonder City section. It's all stuff we've kind of seen before, but afterwards Batman learns Joker is hiding out to the Royal Hotel, and this whole dungeon is great and one of my favourites in the series. Not only does the hotel just have a very nice aesthetic, as Joker has redesigned the whole place and set traps for Batman, but I like it with being such a massive building, Batman has to climb up each level and the challenges keep getting harder as he climbs further. And I really like the deadly Joker minigames that Batman has to play along with to save the hostages, as Joker continues to taunt Batman as he gets further up, and the Predator sections are great here too, and there's a solid boss fight at the end. The story beats are really good here as well. We get a great scene where Joker meets up with the assassins and kills the executioner. It's cool to see just how threatening Joker can be, and even in a room filled with all these supervillains, he still feels like the biggest threat. I love how you can notice Bane's expression shifted to the side, as he immediately sees Joker as being a mad dog compared to Black Mask. And I do like the detail of him being the only person in the series aside from Batman who isn't afraid of Joker, and basically tells him to sit his ass down, as he simply waits for Batman to come to him. Now, while this definitely is the best version of Bane we see in the Arkham games, and he does make a big impact in the brief time he appears, I got to admit, I have always found his inclusion in this game a little bit odd. I know a lot of people will disagree, of course, but just hear me out for a minute. Whilst he's definitely a good villain, I feel like he kind of adds to the villain problem between Joker and Black Mask that I mentioned earlier, and I feel having a third main antagonist in the game for the last chunk just feels a bit too much, and as I said earlier, it did kind of leave Black Mask himself to get shunned a bit. And it may have worked better for the narrative if Black Mask still remained part of the plot, and it was Joker instead of Bane who entered the story at this moment, instead of Gotham Merchants Bank, as the last assassin Black Mask hires to take down Batman. And I feel this may have worked better and improved the pacing, as I always find it weird how the game tried to throw in a very rushed and undercooked Nightfall interpretation in the last third, as I felt Bane may have worked better as the main villain in a possible sequel, rather than implementing him in this story, especially with it only being year 2. It feels like he was added to this game solely because Bane was the main villain in Dark Knight Rises the year before. Granted, I do get they wanted a more physical threat for the boss fights, but as I said earlier, maybe Deathstroke could have played a bigger role and returned here for a second boss fight. With all that said, I do still really like Bane in this game, and he's pretty much the only villain in the Arkham series to actually beat Arkham Batman in a street brawl, I believe, further ramping up the tension, and even Alfred had to call in Gordon so Batman wouldn't be killed by Bane. Once again, I do love Joker's presence here, and the scene where he blows up the building right in front of Batman. The visuals in this scene just look so great, especially with the art style of the game, and I actually like how before Batman sees his life and provides him with a new purpose, this version of Joker is actually a little bit more reckless. It even comes off as having something of a death wish. For example, when Bane fires the RPG at him, he simply extends his arm and waits for it to hit him instead of trying to run away or anything. Obviously, Joker's never been one to fear death, as long as it isn't born in his eyes, but with how carelessly he stands out in the open against all the helicopters who are firing down the scene, it feels as if he genuinely wants to die, and it's when Batman sees his life, does he start questioning himself for the first time. I mean, he really tries to shoot himself right in front of Batman to test how far his value of life goes, and is genuinely confused when Bullock mentions this to him in the next scene. This whole sequence of Harleen, where she thinks he's talking about her, when in reality he's talking about Batman giving him a new perspective on things, is brilliantly done. I love how through his flashback scenes as Red Hood, we see him trying to insert a demon-like version of Batman into his origin, with it even throwing him into his vat and causing him to become Joker, making you wonder if in the Arkhamverse, Batman was even involved in Joker's past. I mean, after all, when Joker first met him, there were no signs he had met Batman personally before the events of the game, and yet here he starts implementing him into his origin story, alluding to the unreliable narrator aspect that was present in the Killing Joke as well. Back to Batman. We see him arrive back in the Batcave, and we get one of my favourite interactions in the series, where Bruce argues with Alfred, who tells him he's outmatched and wants him to quit before he gets himself killed, and Bruce is furious at Alfred pointing out this fact, and doubles down on his vigilante persona, and views Batman as being unstoppable. What makes this scene so good is that both of them make good points. Whilst Batman is definitely needed to save Gotham, Alfred is also correct that Batman doesn't stand a chance on his own and needs help, but he's too self-absorbed to see it. What I love most about this story in comparison to the others is just how character focused it is, and how it handles the development of the characters the best. That's not to say the other three weren't, of course. They definitely had their moments, but I think Origins has the biggest focus on the characters and their emotions, and the man behind the mask. Anyways, Bruce eventually tracks down Bane's hideout and discovers the compound Bane is developing called TN1, and he also learns that Bane figured out his true identity, once again showing just how cunning this version of Bane is in comparison to the dumb brute we saw in the other games. Like I mentioned before, this last chunk of the game does feel a bit rushed, of suddenly having Bane take over as the main antagonist, and Joker being locked up at this point, but it's still entertaining. It's necessary for Batman's arc, which continues to develop well when he has to take on Firefly. I do find it cool how when Batman saves the civilians, they're actually in awe of him and appreciate his help, a clear contrast to begin with Blackgate, when after rescuing people there they were afraid of him, showcasing how his image has improved as he's helped more people throughout the game. Firefly makes her a pretty fun villain too, even if he's a bit one-note, but he does provide a fun mission at least, as he scatters bombs throughout the bridge to lure Batman out, and they do show how psychotic he is, with the bounty just being a nice bonus as long as he gets to burn shit to the ground. It's nice to see Batman and Gordon's partnership develop a little bit further as well, and even though I've been quite critical of Gordon's portrayal earlier in the game, I do like the scene between them after the fight, where the respect for one another grows, and I admit they both did a good job teaming up. I like Batman disappearing from Gordon, something we know will become a bit of a running gag between them. Anyways, Batman heads back to the Batcave, but finds out Bane's already attacked and Alfred's been injured. He hurries to find him, but he's on the brink of death, and we see Bruce at his lowest point in the game, as this is the first time throughout his career as Batman that he's been at a complete loss on what to do, and we see his facade break as he lashes out, and this is a great moment as he literally just punches the ground in anger at his failure. He's able to revive Alfred though thanks to Electrocutioner's shock gloves, and we get another great scene where despite Bruce almost giving up, it's ultimately Alfred who inspires him to keep going and hands him back the mask. Not only is Batman's character arc completed where he finally accepts he needs to open up to people and accept allies, but Alfred also finally accepts his crusade is needed and agrees to keep helping him in the future. Admittedly, having the final showdown take place at Blackgate does feel a bit repetitive, but Batman makes his way through the riot and saves the hostages. A little detail I do really like here is how much we see Batman has changed. Whereas at the beginning he barely took the time to interact with any of the people he rescued, here he actually asks their assistance and to secure the prison whilst he goes off and deals with Joker. Batman eventually finds Joker and Bane, who offer him a tough dilemma where Batman will have to kill Bane or Joker will be electrocuted to death alongside Gordon. Batman is really pushed to his absolute limit here, and is even forced to literally stop Bane's art with the shock gloves to overcome the odds, and I do like how Bane is literally forcing him to not hold back against him, as he wants to beat him at full strength, and not only winning because of Batman's wars preventing him from going all out. Like I said previously, I do hate Gordon's reaction here, as he does kind of look like a dick here for insulting Batman for this, when he clearly knew there was no other option, but Batman is able to kickstart Bane's heart again, who uses the TN1 to turn into a hulking Titan monster. It is neat how they tied up the plot hole of Bane knowing his identity, by the way, with this transformation costing him memory loss, and after a sequence involving sneaking around and using stealth attacks, Batman manages to defeat him. He then heads off to find Joker, and Killer Croc is once again defeated like a bitch after getting shot in the shoulder and running off. I do like how the final combat section is Batman fighting alongside Gordon, showing just how far he's come, that he's actually fighting alongside someone for once instead of just on his own like he has previously. Anyways, Batman heads into the church to fight Joker, and I do really like how that one moment where after learning Bane's life, he briefly drops the act and is actually enraged for a moment when he realizes his plan to break Batman has failed. Joker continues to try and tell Batman how they're not so different, and I like the fact that Batman barely acknowledges his words. I think nowadays writers can tend to lean into the idea of Batman being just as insane as the people he fights, and whilst there may be a little bit of truth with that, he ultimately sticks to his principles and chooses to spare Joker, but not before beating the absolute shit out of him first. I mean, seriously, how is this guy still breathing after that many punches to the face? Afterwards, Gordon enters and they have one final conversation before Batman disappears. Always found it a little bit odd at the end when Gordon says how he wonders why he let Batman go, but that's not what happened. You didn't let him go because you chose to, you let him go because he disappeared right in front of you. Anyways, it is a nice closing speech where Jim believes Batman has given something for Gotham to believe in, and how Batman's become a symbol of hope for the city. Overall, despite some issues, I do really like the story of Arkham Origins. The game's strongest point is definitely the writing for its characters. Batman and Alfred feel more fleshed out in this game, as I stated before, and I love the bigger emphasis on their dynamic and how Batman needs Alfred. Even Joker's more fleshed out in this game, as we see his origin and how his dynamic with Batman started. And I feel like this game definitely has the best character arcs. Focus on a younger and more experienced Batman really aided the story, as it's a side to Arkham Batman that was unexplored before this, and the villains were all good too, even if some of them felt a bit undercooked, and I do wish Black Mask was handled better, and I think the story may have juggled a bit too many elements, but I still think the narrative was strong overall, and it's probably my favourite story in the Arkham series. In terms of gameplay, there aren't that many changes due to not having as much time in development. Like I said before, the combat and stealth remain pretty much the same from City, though I don't really mind that much since the gameplay of these games is amazing. I've got to say though, and maybe it's just me, but it can feel a little bit clunky at times compared to City. I think that's partly due to the bugs the game has. Granted, I haven't encountered nearly as much as some other people have, but every now and again during the combat, the enemies will go flying across the arena once you hit them, or soar into the air, and it just looks pretty funny. There are also a few new gadgets like the concussion detonator, which is honestly pretty useless outside of like one boss fight, but the remote claw is pretty fun to use. You can use it to fling objects at enemies, and some of them can even knock them out instantly, and even use it to hurl them into one another. With that said, it can make the game a little bit too easy at times, so I'm not too surprised they didn't bring it back in Arkham Knight. The upgrade system also kind of sucks in this game, as it doesn't allow you to get the upgrade you want until you get a few others first, which is pretty annoying. The improvements they made to the detective sequences were very good though, like I mentioned previously, and how instead of just having to scan something now, you'll now have to rewind through the crime scenes to pick up details you missed, and you sort of see a simulation of what occurred. You have to put all the pieces together. It was a pretty cool idea, and I'm glad they implemented it, as it did make them actually pretty fun to do now, and how the simulation sort of changed when you find new evidence. The martial artists were also a very good addition as an enemy type, and they're probably the hardest enemy type in the series, as if you don't time it correctly, not only can they do quite a bit of damage, but they can also really interrupt your combo, so you do have to pay attention so you don't lose the free flow during combat encounters. Regarding the open world, I do kind of have mixed feelings, to be honest. I do like the general look of Gotham in this game, and yeah, I know half the map is just Arkham City with a new texture, but even South Gotham looks cool visually, with its tall skyscrapers and how tightly linked the buildings are, and all the dark alleyways where you'll find random crimes occurring, really making Gotham look like a dark and grimy place. And like I stated before, I do love the winter aesthetic, with the snow covering the city and the Christmas decorations around. With that said, it does unfortunately feel pretty lifeless at times in comparison to the open world of City and Night. Despite being twice as big a city, I feel like it hinders the game more than it helps it, as on City, it felt like there was something happening in every part of the city, whether that be a side quest or witnessing the turf war between the three factions, and how, for example, Penguin's thugs move in on Joker's territory. In Origins, it just feels like a lot of empty space at times, and I also feel like there was less dialogue given to the NPCs in the open world as well, as I felt like when I was gliding around, a lot of repeated dialogue was heard as I traversed the city, unlike in City and Night, and unlike in those games where there's actually a good reason for there to be no citizens. In this game, the excuse they use is really flimsy, and I felt like the dystopian chaotic style Arkham City, with it being filled full of criminals, actually played very well with that game's vibe. Same with the more militaristic city we see in Arkham Knight, with the militia taking control, and Origins just doesn't really have as good a reason, and the city just feels so empty at times. The traversal also isn't that good in my opinion. Despite the tall buildings making the city fun to explore at first, you can't actually even grapple to some of them, as some of the bigger buildings can be really annoying to have to go around, feeling like it's just stalling the game at times, like the lights and powers building. The grapnel accelerator is also the exact same as it was in City, when it really should have been faster to account for the larger open world, so traversal just feels really slow and tedious. And yes, the long ass bridge is also a chore to travel through. In fairness, I think they themselves knew how tedious it could be to traverse, and they did add fast travel points you could unlock, but in the other games, I never felt like I needed fast travel, because traversal was actually fun, but in this game I used it quite a bit, because it just became boring to explore as I progressed through the game. The boss fights in this game are considered by many to be the best in the series, even by people who aren't big fans of Origins, and I do think I'd actually agree with that take. To be honest, I never really thought the Arkham series as a whole had great boss fights overall. I don't really think the gameplay of these games, despite how amazing it is, really lent itself to having that many truly great boss fights. There are of course some exceptions, but generally I think a lot of them tended to be kind of meh overall. With that said, Origins ones are actually pretty good for the most part, so let's quickly go through each one. Killer Croc's one isn't anything special, since he's just a tutorial boss. Really, all it consists of is just dodging out of the way and stunning him before beating him up a couple of times. Pretty basic, though you do have to throw a batarang occasionally to blow up a canister he attempts to throw at you a few times. That's something. Really, there's just not a whole lot to talk about regarding this one. Deathstroke on the other hand is a big step up, and my second favourite boss fight in the entire Arkham series. This one deserves props for being the only boss fight in this series to bother choreographing a proper fight between two master combatants that doesn't have you have to fight a bunch of henchmen on the side as well. No, sure, mechanically it's not that hard of a fight. In fact, even on the hardest difficulty, if you played it a couple of times you could do this fight hitless pretty easily. It is very fun though, and you do have to actually nail the timing, as if you're too hasty when countering, he can mess you up quite badly, and there are points during the fight where he'll try to hit you with the remote claw to throw a canister at you and snipe you from afar if you're too far away. Also, the Q2Es do get harder as the fight progresses, and the timing becomes more strict, and you'll have to pay attention if you want to keep your combo, which you'll need to do if you want to perform special combo takedowns, which deal the most damage to Deathstroke. Also, if you attempt to back Deathstroke into a corner, he will activate an animation to roll over you and escape, so you'll want to keep it in the centre so as not to break your flow. The fight choreography is also just really good during the fight, so it makes for a very nice spectacle to see these two just go at it. Sure, it'd be nice if it was a little bit more challenging, but since there are only proper 1v1 hand-to-hand fights in the series, I'm a bit more forgiving in that area. Copperhead's boss fight isn't that good, and it's just a lesser version of the Ra's al Ghul fight from Arkham City, with her making clones of herself so you have to fight, and it's just pretty dull. Just keep an eye out for that one attack where she speeds by to cut you and you'll be fine, but really, the fight is just pretty annoying and not that interesting. Though it is the only time in the game the concussion detonator is actually useful, so there's that at least. Bane's fight at the Royal Hotel is a pretty good boss fight though, and I do like how the arena changes when he tosses you out the window after a bit, and you do have to be careful as he can easily grab you, so you have to be quick when countering him. You also have the time when you make your move, as you have to stun him 3 times to attack, so if you're not quick enough you'll be interrupted when he attacks, and he does a lot of damage as well. I don't even mind the henchmen during this fight, as it'd be a bit too easy without them, and it's a nice way of building your combo, but if you get greedy, Bane will catch up to you. It's harder attack to deal with is his charge attack after you stun and attack him, and it can be especially challenging when also trying to avoid the thugs attacking. Evading him isn't so easy either, as Bane checks your movements, which ramps up the challenge a little bit, so you have to wait for him to get close before evading, so he doesn't get the chance to track you. I think the best way to avoid this attack is simply by running instead of evading all the way. You'll have to be careful of Bane's slam attack afterwards, which is quite a bit of range. Overall, good boss fight. Next up is Firefly, and this one's also pretty fun. It's simply for the spectacle of the burning bridge backdrop. I just have to be careful to avoid the fires around the area when fighting him. Firefly's flamethrower also has quite a bit of range, and you need to hit him with the batarangs and throw the glue grenade to freeze him. Eventually you'll wear him out enough to pull him close and do some real damage. I also really like the part halfway through where he literally destroys the part of the bridge Batman's standing on, and you need to outrun him for a bit as he gains on you by grappling to railings and jumping across fallen parts of the bridge to escape to another part of the area. It does a good job of heightening the tension as you really feel like it's all closing in on you, making you want to end the fight quickly, especially when he starts throwing most of those tiny bombs. The second fight with Bane at Blackgate is pretty much the same as the first fight, but it's still good. But the TN1 fight is a very good fight as well, as since Bane is too powerful, you instead have to utilise stealth to take him down. This fight is actually pretty intense, as Bane can literally rip out vents to try and locate you, and turn around suddenly when you try and sneak up on him, so can be a pretty challenging fight. He also moves very fast, and when he spots you, he literally charges straight at you with insane speed, so you have to be careful. He also does a lot of damage, and it's actually urgency to the fight, as he only gets stronger, so you want to end it quickly, especially as the detective mode jammer is also there to screw you up. It works very well as the last boss fight of the campaign, and it's also one of the best fights in the Arkham series. Outside the main story, we have the Deadshot boss fight, which is also really good, and it's probably the hardest boss fight in the whole Arkham series. Stealth is my favourite gameplay mechanic of the series, so I love this boss fight, as Deadshot can really target you, even if he's a good bit away from you, and change the trajectory of his bullet to hit you, so you have to be extra careful, and you really have to pay attention to the henchmen's movements, as you have to stun and beat down Deadshot to do the most damage. If you take too long, they'll be on you in an instant. Not to mention, if even one of them spots you, Deadshot will also be able to shoot you even from far away, so you have to know when to make your move. It becomes even harder as more henchmen start entering the room. The other bosses in the side quests aren't nearly as good though, like Black Mask, who's just a more durable henchman. There is Shiva, but her boss fight's also pretty mid, as she just spawns in a group of ninjas a couple of times as you slowly dwindle her health down. All in all though, the boss fights are solid, and I wish Arkham Knight would have continued to improve upon them instead of just regulating the boss fights to being Batmobile related, so that's a shame. On to the side quest. Much like all the other Arkham games, they're a bit of a mixed bag, and Origins unfortunately probably has the worst side missions overall. However, there are definitely some good ones. The best one in my opinion is the Mad Hatter side mission. It's very reminiscent of the Asylum Scarecrow sequences, which I loved, and whilst not quite as good as those sequences, it's still a very fun mission. Having to make your way through a twisted and distorted version of Wonderland is really cool, and there's even a few cool gimmicks the mission had, like having to fight a group of henchmen inside of the mirror, and even just some of the set pieces like the playing card bridge Batman runs across really leaned into the campiness in a cool way, and Mad Hatter's always been one of the more interesting rogues to fight in these games, as his abilities allow the developers to do interesting missions such as this. Another side mission I liked was Anarchy's. It's not that long of a mission mind you, as it consists of Batman having to go around and stop the bombs he's planted while fighting off his henchmen before confronting Anarchy in the courthouse, but what made the mission good was the character of Anarchy and how he works as sort of twisted parallel to Batman, who also seeks to rid Gotham of corruption, but going about it in a complete wrong way. It was also nice seeing the courthouse from Arkham City, and the final fight was alright too, as you have to avoid the Molotovs he things at you, and he has quite a bit of health. Overall, pretty good side mission I think. The Penguin Cache's side mission is lame. All it consists of is you going to a location, taking out a group of thugs, and disarming the weapon cache. Nothing really that interesting about it other than some dialogue with Barbara, which is pretty cool, but unfortunately, Batman has no lines of dialogue throughout this mission, so you don't even get to hear them interact with one another, so that's a shame. It also means this mission doesn't have a whole lot going for it. I like Deadshot's one, and how we get another detective sequence where you have to find out who blew up the helicopter, and it's cool to piece it together. And it's exciting when you find out it's Deadshot, which means you'll be able to take him on. The boss fight is good, though I already covered the boss fight earlier. Though I do wish the boss fight took place at a different location than the Merchant's Bank, since we'd already been there before. Black Mask mission is basically just a copy of the Fragile Alliance mission from Arkham City, so nothing too exciting there either unfortunately, and his boss fight kinda sucks as well at the end. Very disappointed for the guy who was marketed as being the main antagonist of the game. Bird's side mission is also lackluster, though I guess it was kinda cool to have to intervene in the fight between the two gangs, but all this really consists of is tracking down his hideout and beating up a bunch of thugs. Also, since he's been right-hand man, you think they probably could have moved this fight to the main campaign anyways. Shiva's quest is also pretty mid, though there's at least a bit more to it than Bird's, and I do like the surprise at the begin with how she gets the jump on Batman and meeting her for the first time, and you then have to save the hostage by completing the puzzle before confronting her in a pretty underwhelming boss fight. I suppose there's some nice lore though, since we know she was working for Ra's al Ghul, so it's nice to see how far back his machinations go, especially when you listen to the audio tapes. Riddler's side mission is also not that good either, as you have to locate his data packs, which are basically the same as the Riddler trophies. However, there are no riddles this time around, which is the same as they provided some interesting side stories about the Arkhamverse once you scan them in Arkham City at night, and there are also no Riddler rooms you have to go through like there was in the City at night, like when you had to rescue the hostages and then Catwoman. The end of the quest is also disappointing, as you don't actually get to meet Riddler in person, though I guess it was kind of cool seeing the first ever Riddler trophy, but the payoff just doesn't feel worth it to collect all the data packs. Overall, I do really like Arkham Origins despite some of the flaws I had with the game, but for a game that solely existed to bridge the gap between City and Night, it's still quite impressive what they pulled off, despite not being made by Rocksteady with shorter development time. The story is very good and focused more on the characters and their development, and really fleshed out some of the dynamics, like the one between Bruce and Alfred. And you already know the gameplay is amazing in these games, and despite a few duds, even the boss fights are at their strongest. Sure, the traversal was the worst of the games, and some of the side missions were repetitive, and despite me liking the story, there were some things I wish would have been a little different, but overall, I think this was a welcome addition to the Arkham series, and I really hope we get a remaster someday. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.